I'm Tim Constantine, and from Washington, D.C., this is the Capitol Hill Show. For most of his life, Donald J. Trump's name meant business. That might be luxury resorts, that might be luxury hotels, but the Trump name meant business. Over time, that transitioned, and the business became politics. In 2016, Donald J. Trump was elected 45th President of the United States. And whether in business or in politics, the one steady thing was that family was more trusted than any other advisor. In 2016, his sons and daughter, their spouses, and other family members all played a role in his election.
The United States 2024 presidential race is in full bloom.
Please welcome the next President of the United States, President Donald J. Trump.
Former President Donald Trump is the Republican nominee, and current Vice President Kamala Harris is the Democrats' choice. Each has a team of political operatives and experts behind them. In Donald Trump's case, family plays an oversized role. While his son Eric runs the family business, Eric's wife, Lara Trump, is running many facets of the national campaign. She is the co-chair of the Republican National Committee.
The Trump family is very tight-knit, and that's not just an image. When the president was president, when he was serving in the White House, his best and most reliable advisors were family. Tell me about that dynamic.
I think that's been part of who the Trump family really has always been. You know, if you look back at Donald Trump, he started as a real estate mogul. And then, of course, he had this real estate empire that then the children, my husband Eric, my brother-in-law Don, and Ivanka all sort of went into the family business. And then he became a television star with The Apprentice. And then everybody sort of went on The Apprentice and learned about being on television. And I think it's been a natural progression in some ways that the family always sort of follows his lead. And in a lot of ways, look, we all learned so much in 2016 out on the campaign trail. None of us had really ever been political before or did any of this, never campaigned certainly. And we learned a lot, and it has become, obviously, I guess you could say, some people say it's the family business. We still have a business, we still have a company. My husband runs it, but I think naturally we all sort of adapt, and I'm not even a blood relative, and somehow I have adapted as well, and now I'm the co-chair of the RNC, so.
Well, and that's where I was going to go.
Yeah.
You are co-chair of the RNC. How did you get, you said before 2016, you really weren't involved politically, and here you are essentially running the show at this point. How did you get from point A to point B?
Well, there's no straight line to go places, certainly. Look, I think I was so impacted in 2016 when Eric and I were out on the campaign trail. I'll actually never forget the very first place that I really went was Iowa for the Iowa caucuses. And Eric and I traveled the entire state of Iowa. And I'll never forget this one experience with a woman. And she was in tears and she said, if I didn't have the opportunity to live with my son, because of Obamacare, I wouldn't be able to afford my insulin. And that moment really imprinted on me. And I said, this is about people's lives and what we're doing here and the hope that she had for Donald Trump to become president. I said, this is very powerful. And this really means something to people in this country. And it's then that I started to really understand why this is so important and why it matters who runs this country, who's president, who you're electing to Congress to represent you around the country. And so obviously I have been involved since that moment. I was a senior advisor to the campaign for his 2020 re-election. And I actually started that in 2017. He asked me to stay at the campaign as the only family member, I think, to do it. And so if you look back, I've actually, ironically, had probably more presidential campaign political experience than most people who are political pundits and make their career in politics. And so this was, I guess you could say, a bit of a natural progression to then step it up to the next level. I'll be honest, I had no anticipation of it. When my father-in-law called me and asked me if this is something that I would consider doing, I initially said, I don't think so. But he's the one who, he's very persuasive, you might imagine. He's the one who ultimately said, listen, I think this is a great role for you, and I think you can do what needs to be done at the RNC. And so I'm honored to be here, and it's something that I take very seriously, that I'm working very hard at, and more so than just doing a great job, of course, for our party, and of course, because I want to see this election go a certain way. This is my father-in-law, and I don't want to let him down, so I'm working very hard in it.
Sometimes lost in the rough and tumble world of politics is the fact that candidates are real people with real lives and real families. I asked Lara Trump where she was when President Trump was shot.
Tell me where you were when the president was shot, how you found that out, and how that whole story unfolded.
Eric and I were actually watching at home at our house in New York. We were with our kids, and I was actually getting dinner ready for the kids, and we had the rally on, and I literally was there like peeling a carrot for one of my kids, and I looked up and he was on the ground, and I knew, I said, I don't know what this is, but I know I need to change the channel. So I did, and Eric and I went in another room, and I mean, it felt like an eternity, to be honest with you, that he was on the ground. And I think we all as Americans will remember that moment where we were, what was happening when we found out, but to be watching in real time as a member of your family is shot at and possibly shot, it was certainly one of the most terrifying experiences I've ever had.
Lara Trump's husband, Eric Trump, told me his dad certainly doesn't need to be doing this. He does it for a different reason.
You mentioned your dad could be home, playing golf, retiring, and he's made a different choice. Say more about that.
He loves this country. He would have a much better life if he was at Mar-a-Lago, playing golf every day, doing whatever he wanted to do in effectively retirement. He doesn't want to do that. He loves this country. He sees this country is going down the tubes. Education's broken this country. Our military was broken this country. Vets were being treated horribly. Our economy was absolutely shot. We weren't respected around the world. And he changed all of that. We had the best economic footprint we've ever had. He built the greatest military this country's ever had. He actually believes in the Constitution, unlike so many of the people in power right now. He did something about the illegal immigration coming into this nation. And he stopped every country around the world from ripping us off. And I'm incredibly proud of the guy.
When President Trump asked Lara to take a leading role in the Republican Party, he expected big changes.
You and Michael Whatley took the reins in March, and
Yes.
there's been a lot of changes. It's a leaner organization. It seems to be a more focused organization. Tell me what the broad changes you had to make immediately were in order to get that ship on track.
Well, certainly we did a little staffing shakeup. We have also fully combined forces with the campaign. And having worked on 2 campaigns, I can say we worked alongside the RNC in the past, but we were never one cohesive team. And we really are that now. There's no daylight between the Trump campaign and the RNC. And the advantage that gives us is that we don't have multiple people from multiple organizations doing the same jobs. We have one person from one organization, one team doing that job. That means the money is able to go farther. That means we are very focused on the task at hand. In addition, we said, all right, what is it that we need to do to ensure victory come November 5th? And we believe if every legal vote is counted and only legal votes are counted, Donald Trump will become the 47th president.
Free and fair elections. It's something both parties talk about. Hillary Clinton has continually raised questions about the 2016 election, and Trump himself cast doubt on 2020. Before hearing more from Lara Trump on how Republicans will address voting issues, we went to an expert. Hans von Spakovsky of the Heritage Foundation has researched elections and election fraud.
In 2016, Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton.
Right.
Hillary Clinton, to this day, in her speeches, will sprinkle in something about how the election was stolen from her.
Right.
Donald Trump lost in 2020 and famously made claims that his election had been stolen. Is there evidence in either one of those that we swore in the wrong person on January 20th of the following year?
Look, that in 2016, no, there's nothing really to support what Hillary Clinton did. What she's really mad about is the fact that she just barely won the popular vote, but the Electoral College is the way we decide the presidency, and she lost that. With Donald Trump, the whole problem with that is that we're never really going to know the answer to that. And the reason is that, look, there were lawsuits filed in different parts of the country, particularly in places like Georgia and elsewhere, in which a lot of claims were made about illegal votes being cast, about legitimate votes not being counted. What should have happened in those cases is they should have gone to the end stage. You know, the stage where you actually have a trial, a hearing, where you examine the claims, determine their credibility. But unfortunately, all these judges, this political hot potato had landed in their lap. They didn't want to have to do that. And so almost all of these cases, without exception, were dismissed on procedural grounds. So we never actually got to the stage to examining the credibility and legitimacy of those claims. So I can't answer that question, and I don't think we're ever going to be able to answer that question.
There are certain pockets around the country, like Chicago has a long history of questionable politics, or Detroit never quite can match up how many people voted versus how many votes showed up. Year after year after year, the numbers don't work. We've seen it more recently in, say, Atlanta or other big cities. Is there a way for that to be corrected, or is it simply there are going to be certain pockets where corruption rules the day?
Well, look, it's hard to do something about people who are willing to be corrupt. I mean, these days, Philadelphia is an example of that. You may recall, Tim, just 2 years ago, former Democratic member of Congress there pleaded guilty to a dozen felony counts of bribing poll managers in Philadelphia to dump bogus votes into ballot boxes. Two of the poll managers also pleaded guilty to that. You know, that's the kind of corruption that unfortunately can happen. I will say that a lot of states have cleaned things up. You know, the one good thing that came out of the 2020 election was it made a lot of state legislators realize, you know, we do have vulnerabilities in the system. And so some big election reform packages were passed. I mean, remember, Joe Biden went to Atlanta to complain about the huge reform package that Georgia had passed. Georgia was a place of controversy in 2020. They passed some very good reforms there. And what happened, contrary to what Biden said in 2022? Huge increase in registration and turnout, I think, because people were more confident in the elections there.
We hear a lot, and I remember doing this as a young man, you hear a lot about poll watchers. And you can sit in on any particular precinct and watch how the process is done, watch how the ballots are distributed. How does that process work when we look at a national election, a federal election? How does that process work, and is it consistent from state to state?
It's not consistent from state to state, although every state provides for poll watchers. In fact, that was one of the problems in the 2020 election, was you had election officials in places like Philadelphia and Detroit doing everything they could to prevent designated official poll watchers from being able to see what was happening. That is a real problem. I mean, think about the fact that what does our State Department do? We send teams of observers to other countries, to other fledgling democracies, because we understand transparency is very important. And one of the things that we've pushed at Heritage is making sure that states have laws that allow observers to see every aspect of the voting process, not just in polling places, but they need to be downtown where the votes are being counted. They also need to be downtown where these days so many absentee ballots are being opened, signatures verified, and then counted. So that is essential to a secure election.
When I was a kid, we had paper ballots. Later, we had punch card ballots. And there was always a big issue about chain of custody. You had law enforcement would take a ballot box, a secured box, in a law enforcement vehicle to downtown, to wherever it was they were counting. Now, a lot of things are done electronically. There is no transfer in the back of a sheriff's deputy's car. It's an electronic transfer. How do we make sure the, quote, chain of custody, the integrity of that chain is maintained when the transfer is being done often by a third-party company?
That's a very good question, and that's an important question. And I don't think county and state election officials are doing enough to secure that. I mean, one of the things that I've pushed for years is that if you are a jurisdiction that actually uses electronic voting machines, they should not only should they not be connected to the internet, they shouldn't be capable of being connected to the internet. The way those electronic voting machines should work, and this is the way it's done in a lot of places, is they have a cartridge or tape in the back of the machine that records all of the votes. And what needs to happen is the poll manager, the assistant poll manager, and the poll watchers need to be able to see at the end of the day those tapes taken out of each machine, put into a ballot box, and carried downtown. That's the kind of chain of custody that you're talking about. And it's problematic when that doesn't happen. You know what has made that worse is this push for drop boxes. You know, it's one thing to drop a paper ballot into the ballot box in a polling place. You know, it's guarded, it's watched. I can't walk into a polling place and stuff 100 ballots into the ballot box. But with drop boxes in places where they have set them up with no surveillance, no guards, that can be done. And in fact, you may have seen that, you know, a mayor's election primary was recently overturned in Bridgeport, Connecticut, because that's exactly what happened. People were coming up and stuffing huge numbers of absentee ballots into drop boxes.
Lara Trump is making sure the GOP is focused on doing all they can to assure the integrity of the vote.
We clearly have millions of Americans out there who felt like 2020 was an election they have a lot of questions about. They didn't get a lot of answers. We can't go back and rehash exactly what happened, but we can learn a lot of lessons, and we're trying to apply those lessons right now. So we have put in place a historic election integrity operation at the RNC right now. There's never been anything in politics like it. And our goal is not just to make Republicans feel good that when they go vote and confident that when they go vote, their vote matters and their vote counts. This is for every American citizen, because we need an electoral process that every single citizen, whether you're voting Republican, Democrat, or third-party candidate, believes in and trusts, and we're going to reestablish that.
That's the key right there, is not only, obviously from your perspective, you want to win the election, so you want to make sure everything is done properly. But how important is it to the public, to the American public, that they believe that the system is fair, no matter who wins?
Right. Well, it's a foundational element of who we are as Americans, to trust that we have free, fair, and transparent elections. And I think it's very concerning that a lot of people don't feel that way right now. And our goal is to reestablish that trust. We never want somebody to say, hey, I'm not even going to go bother to cast a vote, because it's not going to matter. Your vote matters and your vote counts. It is your civic duty, I believe, as an American citizen, to get out and get involved in this process. We have the power, and we, the people, choose who represents us. They work for us in Washington, D.C. We can't forget that. And we have the ability to choose who those people are. And so I think it is fundamental to us as Americans to have an election process that we feel works and is fair.
And you've got a thing called Protect the Vote.
Yes.
Tell me what that is, and if people want to get involved, how do they do that?
ProtectTheVote.com is our website, and this is part of our election integrity operation. So what we have pledged to do from the RNC, Michael Whatley and I, is to have 100,000 volunteers across the country who are going to work, especially in our battleground states, but every state. These are people who are going to volunteer as poll watchers, poll workers. They're going to be in the tabulation centers. We have to be eyes in the room and boots on the ground and people just to watch the process every time votes are cast and every time votes are counted. And that way, there should be no questions. We are training people in order to understand the process more. I think once you understand how the sausage is made, it's a little less mystifying to people. So we're training people all across the country to do those things. We are asking if people are legal experts. If you're a lawyer out there, you don't have to be trained in election law. We want you to come be part of the team. We want to have lawyers in the room as well. So if there is any question about anything, they can tackle that right there, right then in the moment, not wait days, weeks, or months later.
Is it worrisome when, I'm thinking, I'm old enough that I remember when there were paper ballots and then there were punch card ballots, and somehow we found out by 11 o'clock that night who was the winner.
Yeah, amazing.
And now everything's computerized, so
Yeah.
it'll be better and more efficient, and it takes a week or 2 weeks or a month to find out for sure.
Doesn't seem to make sense, right? Yeah.
The process is of concern, I think. Let's talk about fundraising. Since you came on board in March, what's the magic number at this point? How much have you raised?
We have, as a party and a campaign together, $400 million right
$400
now.
million. And they always say, money is the mother's milk of politics.
Yes.
But why is that? I think if you go to mom and dad from Iowa and they're taking their kids to ballet and to Little League, 400 million is just a number that makes your eyes glaze over. So why is that important? Where does that money go?
Well, it goes to our ground game. It goes to our election integrity operation. These things are very expensive. We want to have a massive group of people out there around this country, of course, protecting the vote. We want to make sure also at the RNC, we're taking this money very seriously. Like I said, we have kind of pared things down so that your money goes farther. We need to make sure that we have money for advertising, for pushing back out there against the narrative that we're obviously going to see from the other side. This is a side, the Democrats, who traditionally have lots of massive money infused into their organizations and into their campaigns. We have to be able to fight back against that. And not only are we talking about the top of the ticket, of course, we want to reelect Donald J. Trump. We got to win the Senate. We got to win the House. We have to have majorities there so that we can actually make substantial and lasting changes to this country. And so we have to invest in a lot of those races as well. It is so important that everybody does whatever it is they can, and whether that's donating, whether it's becoming part of the team for our Protect the Vote tour, or whether it's joining up on our what we call Trump Force 47. That is that you identify 10, 20 people in your community, friends, family, people you know, and you make it your mission to get them out to vote. If you think about the fact that the 2020 election actually came down to really thousands of votes places, right. That model is what we used in the primaries. And if you look at the primaries, Donald Trump got more primary votes than any candidate in history. And it's because we had people identify people in their communities and their neighborhoods, at church. They said, I'm going to make sure that person goes to vote. We want people to join us on that fight and on that mission, TrumpForce47.com.
Themes. I always say the Democrats, at least since Bill Clinton, the last 30 years, the Democrats, I don't have to agree with the message, but they're very good at delivering their message. They stay on message. And there have been certain times where the Republicans have not been as good at staying on message. What are the themes for the 2024 election? What's the message that you're trying to drive home to the American public?
I think it is a comparison, and you can do that right now. You can compare two different presidents and two different presidencies. We had 4 years of Donald Trump, so you don't have to wonder, right. What will this be like? Oh, they say he'll be a dictator on day one. They say that he'll start World War III. In fact, the opposite happened, of course, all the things they predicted about Donald Trump. So you don't have to wonder. You just have to remember what your life actually was like. And I think when we remind people how much more money they had in their pocket, how much safer their communities were, how much more secure our southern border was, how much stronger our standing was on the world stage, those are things people actually can hearken back to and remember, because it really wasn't that long ago. And our message is, it's really the age-old, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And the truth is, no one in this country can say they are better off. We have to get out there. We have to communicate to people that if your life is not headed in the way that makes you happy, that makes your family safer, that puts more money in your pocket, you can change all that come November 5th with a vote for Donald J. Trump.
We focus a lot of the attention this year on the presidency, but you mentioned the House and the Senate. And how important is that, first of all? But second, what do you see there? What's your confidence level? Some of those races in the Senate line up pretty well for the Republicans, but anything can happen. So what do you see come November?
Look, we feel really good as a party come November. I think we feel great at the top of the ticket, but you're right, we do have some tough races down ballot. We're going to be focusing on races that we know are close, but we believe we can win. And a lot of these races are in states, like we have congressional races in the state of New York and the state of California that I think could actually make a huge difference and are very winnable. Of course, we're paying attention to a Senate race in Montana that I think is going to need a little bit of help. Anywhere we, as the RNC, are going to be able to give a boost, of course, it's the NRSC and the NRCC who usually are funding those campaigns and those races. We will be there as the party to back them up, to make sure they get the resources, to send our surrogates out to campaign for these people as well, because that ultimately we think will make a difference.
Final question on that is, you're a triathlete. You
Yes.
work out, you practice, you have a goal for where you got to be, but you know you have to train, you got to do the work in order to achieve the goal. I look at a race like this and I think, between now and November is a long time. There's a lot to be done. And I think back to, say, 1996, when Bob Dole was the candidate. And people loved Bob Dole. The Republicans loved Bob Dole, but the confidence level was not high. They felt like, yeah, we hope we can win, but underlying that was clearly, gosh, I don't know that we can beat Bill Clinton. And so I always wonder, you got to do the work between now and November, but assuming the work is done, how confident are you that Donald J. Trump is standing there on January 20th of next year?
I am incredibly confident, and I think it's palpable throughout this country. There's a bit of a feeling and an energy that's very much like we felt in 2016, but it's bigger. And I think wherever you go in this country, you cannot dispute that. I have been in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, in Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, California, New York. I'm telling you, something is happening to people in this country, and you can feel it. But you noted that I'm an athlete, and any good athlete knows you don't stop playing the game before the buzzer sounds, before the last second of the game, and that's how we have to operate. We can't take anything for granted. We certainly feel the wind in our sails. We feel the energy and momentum behind us as a party and behind our candidate right now, but we're going to play every second of this game, every step of the way up until it is done and over, and we are going to fight everywhere we can and in every way we possibly can for a big win.